Hi, I'm Alexandra March.
And I'm Nicole Zell. And you're listening to Follow Your Art.
In light of recent events with America and Iran, we found it poignant to research Iranian-American artists that live in our community, and we stumbled upon Nazanin Moghbeli's profile, and it's absolutely stunning.
So I'm just going to read a little excerpt from her bio. As a young girl, even in the midst of war, Nazanin Moghbeli had a heightened awareness of color. Growing up in Tehran during the Iran-Iraq War, she recalls the nights when her darkened bedroom flickered with colored light, oranges, reds, and yellows, an eerie spectacle punctuated by the distant thuds of explosions. Other nights she hid in the basement and there was only blackness, deep, consuming, and eternal. Her days, by contrast, were often strangely normal. School, music lessons, playing outside with her cousins. And we go on to talk about how obviously her art has been influenced by this and more of her background. But I just wanted to read that because it paints such a beautiful picture of her childhood and what eventually shaped her as an artist and a person. We were really lucky to be able to do this interview with her. This is incredible.
We're very excited to have you. You have really touched our hearts with your discipline and your artwork. So we have a lot of questions for you, if you're okay with that.
Let's do it.
She's like, that's what I'm here for.
So let's just get started with, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you're from, what's your family like?
Sure. So I am Iranian, and I grew up in Iran until about age 9. My parents were both Iranian, and we had pretty normal upbringing, lots of cousins. I have lots of aunts and uncles, and we all lived within a couple blocks of each other, spent a lot of time playing in the yard, making up games. And also, you know, my parents were both really into the arts, particularly into music and drawing. So we always had, you know, a piano lesson or my parents singing in the background while cleaning the house. Or, and poetry kind of throughout for various occasions. So it was a very happy and carefree childhood infused with a lot of art and music.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
Your mother was also an artist, right?
Yeah, so my mother's been an artist her whole life. She does everything you can imagine. She's currently a calligrapher, and she's very, successful in calligraphy, but she's done things like drawing and gold leafing and miniature painting and furniture making, and she's really very talented and versatile in her abilities.
Can you remember the first time you felt creative expression?
It wasn't really defined that way for me growing up because it was just integrated into our lifestyle. My dad tells me this story when he was a little boy, when he was like 6 or 7. His family played music, and they would get around and play music, and they would ask him to go get the sewing machine box, and he would come and like turn it upside down and pretend to play the tombak, which is a percussion instrument. So he would like play the sewing machine while his family played music. So it's kind of a very not special. It's just kind of part of life. So I don't ever feel like it was like, oh, I can be creative in these ways. It was just part of the way that we existed together as a family.
So calligraphy, if you could talk us through that, and was your mom the inspiration for how you got into that?
So I studied calligraphy when I was a young child, and it was actually kind of painful because everyone had to write with their right hand if they wrote calligraphy, because the tools, they're basically bamboo pens that are beveled so that you dip them into ink and then you write. And my teacher used the right-handed bevel and kind of taught everyone who was right-handed. So I'm left-handed, and so I had to learn to write right-handed, and it was frankly torture. So that was my introduction to calligraphy. So I did it for a couple of years and then kind of stopped. As an adult, my mom became a calligrapher kind of as an adult as well, and I really loved the way that the ink could be used at different speeds on the paper, depending on how fast you move your hand, depending on how wide the bevel was, depending on how much ink you got. And just the variety of lines that could be created to me looked more like a drawing than kind of a text or something that referenced text. So I was drawn to it from that purely aesthetic kind of formal dimension. And I never really claim to be a calligrapher. I didn't study calligraphy. I do now, actually. But I was really brought to it from this, how do we use these tools to create abstract drawings? And it's really been through the years of this practice that I realized actually how profound the relationship is for me as a representation of my relationship with my mom and also with my heritage, because I have a lot of resistance to some of the very literal issues and aspects of Iran and kind of politically and religiously, et cetera, as it is now. And also find it incredibly beautiful and inspiring and kind of soaked in this rich heritage. And so for me, using these ancient tools, but not writing the Quran or not writing the poems, but really kind of liberating the line to be abstract and be something different, represents kind of that tension for me of all the complicated emotions I have about, being an Iranian living in America.
Going back to when you had to learn how to write right-handed, can you now write both left and right-handed?
No, I only write with my left hand.
Good for you. Wow. So you had to retrain yourself.
No, it turns out that it's totally a myth that you have to write with a different bevel for left-handed people. Like I've learned from other master calligraphers that you can use the same pen, the same calligraphy tools, and write with your left hand. It's just a slightly different, relationship between your body and your hand and the paper. It's not the same as if you're writing right-handed.
I can't speak for Iran, but I know for certain cultures that if a child is born left-handed, it's like taboo almost. People think that
even
it's like,
Catholic
oh, you're left-handed.
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
I don't know that if it's taboo or not, but I know that for this particular teacher, he was insisted that But no, I write with my left hand.
How has taking this course on calligraphy changed how you go about your art now?
That's a great question. I'm not sure what the answer is yet. So I study with this master calligrapher who's actually based in Stockholm. His name is Ostad Ghertasi, and he does online lessons that are individualized to a student. So it's not like a course, but he teaches and then you write something and send it back and he makes the corrections. And I've only been doing it for 6 months. I'm learning a lot about taking better care of the tools, carving them when they need to be carved, how to make the ink, work for what I'm trying to do. What about the paper? How do you prepare the surface? A lot of things that I find very important to the abstract work that I'm doing, I'm learning from him. I'm also just enjoying the discipline of learning the exactness. Calligraphy is so exact. Everything is measured. You measure everything, the relationship, the height of the letter, the width, the relationship to the next letter, how it's written on a line. And I love that. I think it's fascinating because the same is true with drawing. You don't approach it the same way. You don't measure, at least I don't. But visually, some drawings work and others don't. And so how do you kind of dissect that? And calligraphy kind of helps me do that. I don't know where it's going. I doubt that I'll ever be a calligrapher because I'm not, I'm much more in the gestural, abstract creating process than the detail and the rule following. We'll see.
Fun, yeah.
We'll see where it goes.
So do you Skype with him or is it just back and forth?
It's all on Telegram, which
cool.
videos and voice memos and things like that.
I was wondering how you balance work life, mom life, and being an artist.
I don't. I think that's the honest answer. Balance is a funny word because it implies that you kind of figure out how to do things in a way that you have calm and
you've reached some enlightened state.
Yeah, right? I think that what's really helped me is understanding that there'll be weeks where I'm really focused on the kids, or weeks that I'm really focused on the art, or weeks when I'm focused on my work in the hospital, and that I need to allow myself to go with the ebb and flow of different parts of my life rather than every day have 33% of this and 33%, because it's impossible, and I feel incredibly anxious and agitated when I try to prioritize everything equally every day. So for me, obviously my kids come first, they come before everything. And I use ways of sharing some of my experiences with them. For example, my son is really into drawing, my little 7-year-old. And so I'll bring him to the studio and I'll set up like his non-toxic things in the corner and I'll work on mine and we'll kind of work on something together. Or, my 12-year-old is now interested in printmaking. So, and I don't know anything about printmaking, but it's an excuse for me to explore it with him and try to figure out how to kind of overlap those two areas. I think we both benefit from that. So I'm winging it every day, basically.
You have some very artistic kids.
They are very artistic. Yes.
How about your partner? Is he?
He is, my husband is a doctor. He does research on improving access to kidney transplant.
Oh, wow.
And really interesting and very important work. And he also has always been a creative writer. He hasn't done that so much recently, but that was what initially drew us together, was just having kind of the medical interest, but also the artistic interest as well. So it helps because I don't have to explain anything to him. Like, why do you want to go sit in an art studio for 3 hours after, So it's funny. I think a lot of doctors and scientists actually are very, very artistic and very into music in particular has a big overlap with medicine and science. But the visual arts too, it's really stunning when you really talk to, colleagues and find out what they're able to do other than kind of their medical work. But I think it is more music and science and mathematics kind of always,
it always
fit a little bit more
together,
naturally.
yes.
Yeah.
I wish I was better at math, but no.
Yeah, we both are not good at math.
You never know. Maybe you are. You'll discover it, later in life.
So that being said, I know you didn't want to talk about being a cardiologist too much. And I was curious to why and where you're coming from with that.
Sure. No, I think it's a good question. Simply put, when I'm in the art world, I worry that having another career makes people take me less seriously. That I'm like just a hobbyist or that I'm not a serious artist. And that's why I keep them separate. However, having said that, I myself have recently, I would say after our year in France, like really accepted that I inhabit both very fully. And I love being a doctor. It's not that I don't want to talk about it because I think it's not important, but I really find it a privilege and I really, really find it rewarding. I think that when I talk about my art, there's so much there to discuss that I kind of want to keep the focus on that and really go into it deeply rather than kind of be perceived as someone who dabbles in. Not that there's anything wrong with that either. But for me, really, they feel equally important.
As they are.
Yeah.
As they are, yeah.
100% both, somehow.
Yeah.
See, math.
Right.
They cannot do math. Just proved it.
That's 100% both, but not at the same time.
Exactly, yes.
So you said you went to France. I was wondering, what was that about?
A couple of years ago, we had the opportunity to move to France for a year. My husband was promoted and had a sabbatical and found a research group in Paris that was really interested in collaborating with him. And I was not able to take a formal sabbatical from my work. I was at the time at Penn and doing all clinical work, and they really didn't have a mechanism for a physician to take a sabbatical that wasn't involved in research. So I resigned from that position and decided to spend the whole year doing art. And so I rented a studio in this amazing kind of group-owned building where you paid like €4 a day, which is nothing, to rent a small space. And I basically made art and hung out with the kids. So I was like home every Wednesday because they didn't have school and, picked them up every day after school, but had the whole day, during the day when they were at school to make art and also to go see art because Paris is teeming with galleries and
stolen
museums
statues.
And stolen.
I was just there, and my friend was like, "That was stolen."
Yeah, true. No. So it was a really incredible opportunity for me. I mean, one that I wouldn't have necessarily been able to even conceive of. It was the first time that I really, since college, this was an art major in college, but it was the first time since college I had immersed myself in just art, no medicine. And it was interesting in a couple ways. Number one, I realized that I was the person that was most guilty of not taking myself seriously as an artist. To the point that after a few months there, my husband sat me down and he was like, look, you've got to prioritize this. Like, stop going grocery shopping during your studio hours and stop, whatever you're doing. No, I mean, it was really kind of amazing. And he was like, these are your studio days. Like, treat them like you have patients scheduled. Like, go and do your thing. And it just kind of hit me like, wow, I really am not accepting myself as an artist, like to the point that he is encouraging me to. So that was transformative for me, that kind of moment. And then the rest of the year, I was really able to do that more.
Where do you think that stemmed from?
I think I just, I went into medicine. It just seemed like more important and more defined. But the second thing that happened, which was even more surprising, is that I actually really missed being a doctor. And I by the end of the time that I was there, not that don't get me wrong, I was happy to not be, working in the office and like having that mental space, but I had so much time to read and reflect and write. By the end, really felt ready to come back and ready to kind of re-engage with that part of my life. Those were really like remarkable lessons for me.
We talk about that all the time, how difficult it is sometimes to accept yourself as an artist, especially when it's not quantifiable.
No.
Sometimes my husband will come home and be like, what did you do all day? And I'm like, kind of daydreamed, honestly.
Right.
But it was productive. Let me tell you, I had some dreams.
Productive daydreaming.
Yeah. It's true. Well, because you don't get to measure externally, like you said, quantify kind of what you're doing, and you don't get external validation almost ever. So it's really like very internally driven.
That being said, what has been the most rewarding part of this whole process, like after you started putting work out there?
I think that time in France really allowed me to feel that way. And, I've had some exhibits, even before we moved to France, I had some solo shows in Philly and elsewhere, and I'm continuing to exhibit my work. But that almost feels like that's not the important part. I love having exhibitions because it allows me to see the work all together, which is incredibly valuable. And I love hearing people's interaction with the work. Not like, oh, I like that, but just, this makes me think of blah, 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 or, just those conversations, because otherwise you're just by yourself. I don't equate kind of the exhibition success, so to speak, with feeling more serious as an artist. But it's certainly a nice way to engage with the world and get out of my studio and get a sense that actually people are moved by my work. Not everybody, but some people. And it's very satisfying to have those conversations.
What first drew you to abstract and minimalistic art?
My aunt, I think, had a lot to do with it. She's a painter. She lives in Paris, and she took me to the Georges Pompidou Center for Contemporary Modern Art in Paris. And I walked around with her for like 3 hours, and she was showing me all of this amazing, de Kooning and Frankenthaler and whoever else, Basquiat, and and I was like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, this is just weird stuff. Like, I was really young, and I just remember she was so excited and so moved by it that I just kept looking at it over the years, and I don't know, it just resonated with me on some level over the years. And I don't set out to be like an abstract artist or but there's something about the like really deconstructed image, or the way the material looks on the page or the canvas, that really excites me. And I think it's partly the way that it all looks, but also the process of starting out with an idea or a feeling, or not something concrete. It's funny because my mom was like, oh, but you can really draw. Like, why don't you just like make something that looks like something, And my kids too, like, they're like, Mom, like you can actually do art. Like, why are you doing these, uninterpretable things? I think it's fair, but it's definitely not where my heart is.
Sounds like France has played a very instrumental role in your life.
Yes.
During many different phases of your life.
Indeed. I mean,
And
it's
your
kind of
family's
cliche,
cool.
unfortunately, because I feel like all these like artists are like, oh, and then the time in France was so,
Where in France?
important. We were in Paris. We would visit, when I was growing up, we would visit my aunt in
Right.
Paris. But then when we ended up choosing a place to live, that's where we also ended up.
I was wondering if you had any self-care tips for other artists to stay sane while you're in studio time, working really hard.
I could definitely use some.
Okay, we will share. We've been asking everybody. So.
I mean, for me, it's exercise, and it's I love to make puzzles. So in the
wow.
evening, I just I have this thing, they're called Liberty puzzles. They're basically wooden jigsaw puzzles, and I'll just sit and make them, and my kids will come do homework next to me or whatever. And that to me is like a very soothing self-care type thing. But if you have other ideas, I'm open.
Our last visual artist also said movement, dancing, just getting her physical body moving.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And you said exercise, so
yeah.
It's a common.
It's true, because we don't do that enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all stuck in our own brains all the time, right? We got to get the blood flowing a little bit.
Absolutely.
We wanted to obviously talk about this exhibition that you have currently and where people can come to look at it and find it on your website.
Absolutely. So right now I have an exhibition at Quorum, which is in the Science Center in West Philadelphia on the second floor, and it will be up through the 24th of January. This is a body of work called Rupture, and it's inspired by images that I've encountered in my cardiology practice. They're ink drawings. Some are multimedia, mixed media, I should say, graphite, collage, things like that. I'll be doing a closing reception and a talk on the 23rd if anyone's interested in that.
What time is that?
That's at 5:30. 5:30 to 8.
Was this exhibition a form of therapy in any way?
You know, it's interesting. I started it when I was in Paris. I think it was, my way of reconnecting or staying connected with my practice of medicine. And then I've continued it now. I do a lot of time of my professional medical time. I am in this intensive care setting. And so I keep a notebook in my pocket and I make drawings or collect, images of things that come up throughout my day of work at the hospital, and then I take it to the studio and make these more abstract pieces from those moments.
It's a high stress job.
Well, and then that's actually part of the great thing about the contrast of the two sides of what I do is that when I have a really intense day in the hospital, I go to my studio, which is in Manayunk. I change my clothes. I physically take off my hospital clothes and put on my paint stained clothes, and I'll work in the studio and talk about therapy. And I think that keeps me also from taking myself too seriously, just kind of let it go. And I even have on my wall, make a bad painting. No one's going to die. It's going to be okay. Just do it. Who cares? Just make what you want to make and relax. The next series that I'm working on will be quite different. I'm starting a series using some of these calligraphic drawings as a base for then collaging the actual CIA documents from the 1953 coup in Iran, which I started several months ago, and then this past week with all the current events in Iran, it was just weird timing that this was happening at the same time. But that's kind of the idea for the next series. So it's using the same techniques, using the same materials, the abstract ink drawings, but weaving in something much more specific and historical.
Where did that idea first come from?
I really feel bothered by the fact that many people do not know about this coup. So what happened in brief is that the British controlled the oil in Iran. And in the 1950s, this man, Dr. Mossadegh, came to power, democratically elected with a democratic parliament, and nationalized the oil so that the Iranians could actually benefit from the oil that was, harvested in their land. And the British called the Americans and said, hey, this can't really happen because we have a lot of interest in this region and we rely on this oil. And the two of them actually engineered a coup that was successful in overthrowing this democratic government. And it really set into motion a lot of the events that are currently going on. And I feel like as an Iranian, it's kind of part of my responsibility to share that history. I mean, very fact-based. And that's why I'm using the actual documents, the actual words from the CIA declassified documents, so that it's no interpretation. It's just what
the literal facts.
What happened
exactly.
and what,
Yes.
you know.
How much outrage do you feel when you're doing that? Like you said, everything that's happening now is because of what happened in the 50s.
I mean, outrage is complicated because, I mean, I'm an American too.
Right.
I'm like, I feel, and my kids are half American, and you know, it's just a very nuanced situation. I mean, absolutely, I think when you look at the facts of what happened, it seems unthinkable that the U.S. would willingly get rid of a democratic society in favor of financial reasons. That piece of it is really problematic because, you know, as United States citizens, we stand for democracy and we say that we promote democracy in the world. But, you know, when things get tight and it's not in our best interest as Americans, maybe we won't. Yeah. So, but it's not about my emotions about it. It's really about kind of what happened and how did it lead to where we are now, and we all have the responsibility of knowing that history.
And you're telling it now.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
I mean, I hope so. I definitely have never done anything quite so literal before.
Right.
And I'm a little worried about collage and what that means and what it looks like. But I think the concept is really important to me, and the ideas, they need to happen. So I have to figure out exactly what it will look like.
I feel like I'm going to cry. That is so awesome.
I know.
Good luck with making
Thank
that.
you.
Yes.
I'm going to need luck. And if you know anyone with a typewriter, I'm looking for someone.
Ooh.
I want to type this on like real typewriter paper because the documents are, I think it's more powerful to have it. But anyway, it's hard to find a typewriter these days.
If anyone has a typewriter, please email us.
I feel like my
serious.
dad gifted my mom one, like as a last try to win her over. And
That's a great gift.
She probably still has it.
Like,
get it.
That's funny.
I don't know. I'll ask them. So speaking of facts, I was just curious how you felt when you saw Trump's tweet about bombing 52 cultural sites. I mean, you're tied to the arts, you're tied to culture, you're tied to both countries. How did that feel when you read that?
Well, I mean, it's a war crime, so it didn't feel like anyone would be serious about that as kind of a retaliation. And frankly, the whole moment was so destabilizing that I didn't think particularly of that comment. I mean, that would be horrible to destroy those sites, but I just think the whole situation was so terrifying in terms of what are the options of what could happen. And, you know, as an American citizen, I don't want my president committing a war crime on my behalf. No matter what country we're talking about, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, it's Iran or it's Canada. Or, you know, crime's a crime.
You know, raising children with all of this going on, and I just was wondering how has that been? Have they faced anything in school with either kids or teachers? Are they talking about what's going on in school?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's inspired them actually to learn more, you know, about their history. And my daughter, you know, I was really proud of her kind of throughout the week that things were at a heightened, you know, state. She read the New York Times and kind of learned about the coup in 1953 and talked to her friends about it. And, you know, I think that it was an opportunity for them to kind of wake up and say, okay, I'm a half Iranian, part U.S. citizen, you know, U.S. citizen was half Iranian. Like, what does this mean to me? And how do I engage with what's happening? So in most ways, I think it was positive. I mean, it was very distressing for them on a lot of levels. And there was a lot of family, like dinner time conversations. But I think it tuned them into the fact that they need to know the facts and the context so that they can, when they're asked about it, they can talk intelligently about what's been going on. I think this will make an impression on them. I think they'll have a totally different level of engagement with what's going on in the Middle East after this.
And I hope it does that for all of us.
I hope so. I hope so.
How do you think, or do you think, that strengthening an art community could help with these issues and conflicts?
I mean, I think art is is the only hope, really, that we have. I think it has the power to connect people with themselves, which many people are just disconnected. We're just disconnected with ourselves. I also think it connects us with each other, and with this higher purpose of like creating beauty, you know, creating understanding. And I mean, what survives civilization, you know, through civilizations is their arts and artifacts, you know, their music. And so I think it's the most important thing that gives meaning, gives hope, and provides people with a chance to really connect.
Speaking of cultures and what civilizations leave generation after generation, I would love to hear what are some of your favorite aspects of Iran and their culture and, you know, Persia.
So, I mean, the culture and the arts are so, I mean, there's like so many hundreds of years of arts. It would be hard to kind of pinpoint one thing. I think what I love is that poetry is something that is recited by everyone. So everyone, like you could be driving a taxi, you could be, you know, a painter, you could be a chef, whatever you're doing, like there's a poem for every occasion, you know, and they'll, you know, people come out and they'll just like, I wish I could quote one for you now, but my mind is blank. But the fact that something like poetry is just commonplace is really spectacular.
It sounds like it's like everyone's constantly living a play. I love it. It's sounds magical.
It's not always that, but it's not just for like the elite, you know, or like the, you know, the artists or the writers. It's something, and I think that's true with music, and I think it's true with art. I think it's you know, everyone in Iran plays an instrument. You know, there's just art and music everywhere. So for me, just the integration of that into regular life is probably the most powerful. And maybe that's my family and my bias, but that's the sense I have.
Is there anything that you want to leave us, or anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to share with the world?
No, I appreciate you guys inviting me. I think this is a great endeavor, a great project, and an important one for people to get tuned in to what was happening in different artists' worlds. So I'm humbled to be included. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I want people to be able to find your information. So one last time, if you mind sharing your website.
Sure. My website is www.nmoghbeli.com. And you'll see examples of my work there. I also have an Instagram account. I think that's just NMOGHBELI. I don't use it that much, but I do post my exhibitions on there, so follow me there.
So yeah, at the end here, we like to just take a breath. May I love myself.
May I love others.
May I have joy for myself.
May I have joy for others.
May I inspire myself.
May I inspire others.
May I live to love.
May I love to live.
May I live to create.
May I create to live. You can be part of the Follow Your Art fam by subscribing to the podcast and following us on social media. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/followyourartpodcast, and our Instagram is instagram.com/followyourart_podcast.
We'd like this podcast to be a community experience. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to explore, or if you'd like to submit your art to be featured on all our social media platforms, feel free to email us at followyourartpodcast@gmail.com. A quick thank you to Benyo Barshai for providing the intro and the outro music, our studio helpers. You've been listening to Follow Your Art.